that probably since Marcus Page, we saw the point guard position really develop his first year. If you remember, Joel Berry didn't play a whole lot as a freshman, so we didn't get to see the development of Joel Berry till a sophomore year. But we saw a different Coby White really each month from November, December, January, February, and then, of course, into March was a really one of the best, probably the best player on the team and one of the better players in the country. So let's just talk about his individual growth as a player real quick.
Well, I think the comparison to Marcus Page is not a bad one. I do think that he was better earlier in his freshman season. Marcus Page, remember, was a guy that really sort of rounded into form when we got to the ACC tournament. That really wasn't Coby White. Coby White jumped on the scene almost immediately, starting with the game against Texas. That was the game that I think everybody remembers him breaking out in. And, even before then, he really did have some pretty solid performances. I mean, he wasn't fantastic like that Texas game, but, I think that when you look at how he matured throughout the season, he became a guy that was able to take care of the ball a lot better late in the season. Now, he didn't take care of the ball like some of the other point guards that we've seen in Carolina history and more of the recent point guards, because a lot of those guys have been 4-year guys. He was a 1-year guy. We knew that. And, having him out there as a freshman, you knew there were going to be some mistakes. But really, he was just such a different guy because he was able to develop into a guy that at times could take over the offense for the Tar Heels, and that's something that we just don't usually see from from point guards. We never usually see that when it comes to the Tar Heels offense running. It usually runs through a big man. At times it's run through the shooting guard. It's never really run through the point guard where you have a guy that can literally put the ball in his hands, go one-on-one against the defender, and knock shots down consistently. And that's what we saw from Coby White at times this year. He came up big in a lot of different games, and he's a guy that when he made his decision to go to the NBA, I don't think anybody was sitting there saying this might not be the right decision. Everybody knew when he made his decision, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because he had an amazing freshman season.
Yeah, I think when he initially committed to Carolina, I think I can't speak for Roy Williams, but I think the coach staff thought they had 2 years. And then I think, I heard Adam Lucas mention this. He's like, once you saw him practice the first time, it was, this kid's different. And we knew that coming in because he set the state record for North Carolina for high school scoring. I mean, you got to think this state's produced Michael Jordan, was it Antoine Jameson from the state, I think, and a couple of other great players. And he outscored all of them in high school. So we knew coming in he had the ability to score. And it's like you said, there were times really in ACC play where it was, I'm going to put the team on my back and I'm going to carry us. We haven't had that since really Marcus Page, because Joel Berry always had a big that could carry him. And that's really how this team has always wanted to run. If we needed a point guard to carry us, we don't make Final Fours and don't win national championships, kind of like this year's team. But his individual growth, we just saw in November, we saw the flash against Texas. And that was where he just went bananas. It really is no reason why Carolina was in the game. But we knew that wasn't going to be it. We saw him protect the ball a lot better as he got mature. Really, I thought where he got the best was knowing when to run, because we'd see him get the ball and just go. And that's great, because I like to run and your coach likes to run. But if nobody's running with you and you're running 1-on-4, it's not going to turn out well most of the time. And I think you saw that as the season got longer, he picked his spots when to run, and really got a lot better in that, in the open floor and in the half court. You just look at some of what stuff he did as a freshman. He averaged over 16 points a game, shot 35% from three. Those are really good numbers as a 1-year player. And you mentioned he had some really big games. 33 against Texas, of course, that was a loss. 33 in that overtime win against Miami, where he pretty much in the second half didn't miss from three. He had the 62 combined points in back-to-back games against Syracuse and Clemson, which, if I remember correctly, is the most by a freshman in back-to-back games combined. So really just a guy that lived up to his billing, that is a guy that could put the ball in the basket at a really high level.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the pace, and I think that's something that everybody's going to remember, is just how fast he was. I mean, we were saying early in the season, this has got to be the fastest point guard that Carolina's had since Ty Lawson. And when you look back at that 2009 team, what they did so well was when you would miss, they would make you pay, because they were down the floor in the blink of an eye. And at times, that's what Carolina was able to do this year. I thought it worked out out very well that Coby White, eventually got some of those guys that were able to get down the floor with him. I don't feel like this team was really built to run. There weren't a lot of guys around him that were guys that knew to get up the floor extremely quickly. But I think that, while he learned, I think the team around him learned as well that, hey, we got to speed our game up because Coby does play a lot faster than us. I know a lot of people will probably slight him for some of his defensive struggles at times. But again, a freshman, he's a guy that, had some moments where he was able to, force some turnovers. I mean, the game in Cameron against Duke, I thought he was fantastic defensively against a guy in Trey Jones who came in playing extremely well, was a guy that was known for taking care of the basketball very well, and he forced him into some turnover issues. So I think Coby White, when you look back on it, you're going to say this is one of the more impressive freshmen that Carolina has had, especially in the Roy Williams era. And, he was a guy that, I mean, if you need to know anything else about him, the reason that he's a special player, he started as a true freshman at point guard for North Carolina under Roy Williams. That usually never happens. Roy values seniority, especially at the point guard position, and Coby White came in, pretty much had that locked up within the first few days of camp. I mean, that's everything that we were hearing. And, once we got in season, we saw exactly why Roy went with him, and I don't think anybody's going to go back and criticize that decision.
Yeah, I mean, it got to the point where he was so good as a freshman that he was being thrown around with Phil Ford as good as a freshman point guard as Carolina's ever had. And there was people thinking, was he the best freshman Roy's ever had? I still lean more to Hansborough just because of how good he was for that team that wasn't supposed to be good at all, and they still finished top 3 in the ACC, got a top 3 seed in the NCAA tournament, and all this other stuff. But, I mean,
is he the best freshman point guard that's ever played at Carolina?
Ty Lawson made the Elite Eight.
I mean, I know that, but
Ty Lawson also had a loaded team on his back.
This team, now, here's the thing. This team did have a lot of good pieces around it as well, though.
Not as good as that 07-08
but
team,
no,
though.
but what I'm saying is this team is not, we're not trying to say that this team is not, I mean, many people thought once we got late in the year, this team was good enough to make a national championship game. So there was talent here.
Yeah, no. I would probably say because, I mean, he led the team to the best record ever in ACC play, 16-2. It just didn't end well in the NCAA tournament, and that happens. And the Auburn loss got vindicated by the fact they made the Final Four. So in hindsight, wasn't a bad loss. That team made the Final Four and was a bad call away from playing for a national championship. So I would probably say, he's probably been the best freshman point guard because, we talk about Marcus Page, like you said, and Marcus Page is my guy, but as a freshman, couldn't stand him until the ACC tournament. He finally got his stuff together. Kendall Marshall didn't start over Larry Drew until the second half of the season. Led that team to the Elite Eight, but also had Harrison Barnes and the two best bigs in college basketball.
One of the other things that I'll throw out there when you talk about this argument as well is you got to remember with Ty Lawson, he also had Bobby Frazier there as his backup point guard. If you're comparing, what I'm saying is let's compare the backup point guards. Who would you rather have, Bobby Frazier or Seventh Woods?
I'd rather have Bobby Frazier.
I'd rather have Bobby Frazier. Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I liked Bobby Frazier. I mean, he was a guy that came in. If you talk about freshman point guards, is Bobby Frazier not a guy that you have to talk about? Because remember him as a freshman. He had to play a lot. So it's weird. I would still go, I'm saying Coby White is my guy. I think Lawson is probably right there with him. But I mean, they're neck and neck. I mean, it's hard to decide between the two of them because they are very similar as well. But if you look back, I believe Coby, I mean, I don't have the stats in front of me, but just by a guess, Coby has to have more points per game. I would guess a better 3-point shooting percentage because Ty Lawson had his moments where he could shoot threes, but he wasn't really a shooter. So, I'd probably go Coby as well, but it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I mean, and he gave us a lot of fun moments. I remember the play against Duke where he weaved in and out of 4 players with like 3 dribbles. Just kind of the freak of an athlete he was.
That's got to be my favorite basketball play of the whole year because it's just, just the technicality and to be able to finish at the basket. He had a lot of those moments, though. Definitely a guy that I think can thrive at the NBA level because he's not afraid of contact.
Right.
So, I mean, and that's how you got to be with the NBA today is go inside because you're going to draw a foul. We know that. We've heard it for years. The NBA calls a ton of fouls. Yeah, we know. That's going to lend well to a guy like Coby White who is willing to be aggressive and drive the basket, take those hits, and try to finish at the rim. So, I mean, I think his game, it's weird because his game was very successful at the college level, but I feel like he could get even better at the NBA level. And it's rare that you see guys that thrive in both areas. So if he lands on the right team, I think he could really make an impact.
Well, we're going to go ahead and segue to our NBA Combine recap. And we'll start with Coby, who going into the Combine was as much as a sure lock lottery pick as there was from any of the three Carolina players that were attending. And he left without even working out for any or doing any drills or scrimmaging. Kind of shows you where his standing is among the teams at the top of the lottery. Just some measurements. He was 6'4" and a third with shoes, 6'3" and a half without. Weighed in at 191.4. His wingspan is 6'5". That's not bad for a guard. Body fat 4.3%. That's great. And he left with pretty much a draft promise that he will not fall below 7, which is to the Chicago Bulls. Could go as high as 4 to the Lakers, depending on if they like him better than they like Vanderbilt's Darius Garland as a guy to pair with Lonzo Ball and, of course, LeBron James. But this is going to be Carolina's first top 10 pick since Harrison Barnes got drafted in the top 10 to Golden State. Kind of a drought for this program, but that a lot of that had to do with the NCAA scandal and the fact you weren't getting one-and-done recruits. So really a impressive season for Coby White, a guy who wasn't projected to be a lottery pick at all until maybe next year, to a guy who's now a for sure top 10 pick.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at those numbers, I mean, the 4.3% body fat is crazy. I mean, that's a really low number. This kid is an athlete. I'm kind of shocked that he didn't go ahead and go through some of the workouts and do, some of the 7 or what would they call it, 5-on-5 drills. I am a little bit shocked by that because I'm shocked that he may, he doesn't want to go out there and maybe give a lasting impression because, as you mentioned, Darius Garland out of Vanderbilt, that's most likely going to be the pick for the Lakers. I think it just really depends. It also depends on what the Knicks do ahead of them. But I think 4 is probably his ceiling, and that is that's a really big reach because I think that the Lakers will probably go with Garland or Barrett, whoever falls out of those two. But I think Chicago would be a nice fit. I think that Chicago would embrace him as well because they really haven't had that dominant guy since Derrick Rose left. I think Coby could end up being that. The team I want him to end up with is Atlanta. I think that would be the perfect fit for him. Playing with Trae Young alongside of him, they can, interchange however they want with, who handles the ball or not. And I think that's a team that's on the rise. They're in a terrible division, easily the worst division in the NBA. That division was won by the Orlando Magic, who absolutely suck. And I think there's potential for them to be a team that can go from last in their division to first if they get the right pieces in place. I think that'd be a perfect fit for Coby. I mean, is that maybe where you're looking? I mean, of course, we want him to end up with the Knicks, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah, no, I think he'd fit well with Trae Young because he could play on ball and off ball, which is something we didn't see him do at Carolina, but it's something that he's capable of doing, is playing without the ball. And it's like you said, a young team, a team that's focusing on developing players. Mm-hmm. And Coby still's got to develop more defensively than he does offensively, but that'd be a good spot to grow. They got a good foundation there, and like you said, in one of the worst divisions in the NBA, mm-hmm. could very well be a playoff team in a year or two, and he could be well on his way to a very long and healthy NBA career. We'll move on to Nazir Little, who made some noise for the right reasons and somewhat the wrong reasons at the NBA Combine. Wasn't all his fault, the wrong reasons, where he made a statement about how he was fitting in at the Carolina or here at Carolina. And I think the writers just kind of took it and ran as a way to just get some clickbaits on some articles. He never directly blamed Roy Williams for his struggles at Carolina, said he grew a lot more as a player, learned a lot more about the game, but did admit to being hesitant at times because he never quite knew his role. Yeah. that kind of confused me because I thought his role was identified very early in the year where you're going to come off the bench, but you're going to play starter-like minutes, and we expect you to produce. So that kind of caught me by surprise, but they said, I was reading that his interviews might have pushed him all the way up into the lottery discussion because he was regarded as the best interview at the Combine. Now, let's